aim with these monthly one-on-ones is so that people can understand like who we actually are as human beings, good, bad and ugly. Because I always say that the first year of marriage is really hard, and like, boy, did we have a lot of things to contend with.
I give you a kiss good morning every morning.
That's not true.
Here's a unique situation. You're a stripper on the side because you're trying to make extra money. But seriously, right? Like,
Are you a stripper? Where do you think that we'll buy a first home?
Our first home?
Mm-hmm. Australia. Sorry. And that was arguably like one of the hardest, if not the hardest thing that I've had to go through. Welcome back to another episode of First Rounds on Me, a First Rounds on Media production. Today, my darling, we are kicking off a new series of monthly one-on-ones where you and I will dive into some of the most personal, powerful, and sometimes challenging conversations and experiences we've ever had, all in the hopes to connect with you, our dear listeners, on a deeper, more authentic level. Today, in the spirit of Christmas, we're going to have a little holiday heart-to-heart. We're going to talk about gratitude and growth, reflect on the lessons this year has taught us, what it takes to actually build a strong partnership, why men and women are so damn different, and dole out some advice whilst answering some burning questions from our community.
Hi, babe.
Hi.
I think the reason that we're doing this is because a lot of our close family and friends really like having conversations with us that are really deep. And I think on the podcast, when we have guests, we have fun conversations, but we don't really get in the weeds of how we really feel about things.
Agreed.
And I think, I'm excited to talk about some deep
but
stuff.
Even like some of the one-on-ones that we've had, and in fact, all of the one-on-ones we've had, it's either been about the app, which is great. It is personal to us, but it's still kind of like the growth of the app or what do we love about it? And then it will be like statistics and all that kind of stuff. But these monthly one-on-ones will be about really like deeply personal topics. And I think hopefully it just aids people in understanding that they too can open up about the things that are near and dear to them. I think we should start with gratitude and growth, because I think this year, and this will be dropping, I think the week before Christmas. So this year has been significant highs and lows, I think, across the board. I think throughout all of it, we've found a lot of new strengths in each other. So what would you say, first and foremost, is the biggest challenge or biggest challenges that we faced this year?
I think uncertainty. I think not uncertainty with us, uncertainty in like where our life is going. Obviously, we work for a startup and we're always on the move. And I think when you're starting a family, which we're trying to do, one of the key starting points is stabilization, right? Like knowing where you're living, knowing how much money you're going to make, and you could start to plan for the future. And I think that the position that we're in a startup and we're looking long term. Sometimes when you're trying to build a family, it's really challenging. And also understanding that you're the type of person that likes stability, because, on the outside, we have an unstable work environment. You've lived all over the world, so you really cherish stability. And I think kind of us communicating that over the past year has just been so grateful that you've kind of swallowed some of that and been along for the ride. But that was one of the things that really stands out.
I completely agree. And I think when it comes back to stability, like to your point, like the career before I met you for 15 years, I was so unstable. Like it was just like, go here and do this at the drop of a hat. And there was never any consistency. And it's really quite difficult in your psyche. Not to say that I can't do it and I'm incredibly adaptable, but after a while, I think as you get older, you just go, okay, fuck. I need some kind of consistency. And then you hit the nail on the head as well in terms of like, our job is so volatile. It's so chaotic. It's amazing and incredibly exciting and fulfilling, but it just, things shift and change at the drop of a hat, and we have to be so adaptable. And it gets really difficult when you don't have any sense of stability. But I think that in a way, by not having any stability, we've had to find that even in the smallest of moments, in the smallest of things, and it just shows how resilient we are, not only as individuals, but as a couple. And it kind of is again, one of those things where I'm just like, all right, so anything that life throws at us, it may be difficult to deal with, but we can deal with it. Yeah,
and I think that whether we did it on purpose or on accident, we've kind of used each other as stability. And I think that's really great. And maybe inadvertently, we've gotten so much closer. Our relationship has gotten so strong, because even for me, somebody who flies by the seat of their pants, I do everything the last second, and I am really good with quick change. It's been so much quick change this year. We've lived in, countless hotels for weeks. We've lived in, living with my parents right now for a month before we go back to Australia
for Christmas.
So we're just constantly on the move. And even for me, it's getting to be difficult. But I think on the flip side of that, we're so stable with each other that as long as I'm with you, it's like somewhat grounded. But yeah, it's just been really, really interesting to see that play out this past year.
I think the uncertainty really taps into this, and I think that perhaps in the future we can have like maybe an entire episode surrounding it, because it is so interesting. But I think that taps into what we dealt with in terms of not only trying to have a family, but obviously having a miscarriage. Like that was, both you and I have always wanted a family, and it's something that we actually talked about on our very first date. And then we fell pregnant last year, I think around this time actually.
Yeah.
And then I lost the baby at, I think, 9 weeks. And, you know, you talk about uncertainty and you talk about needing stability in a moment. Like that was arguably, I feel like I've been through some pretty hard things in my life, and that was arguably like one of the hardest, if not the hardest thing that I've had to go through. And I think it could have done one of two things. It could have brought us together. It could have pulled us apart. And I think it only brought us together because we realized, A, really solidified the fact that that's something that we want, is a family. And then B, again, solidifying the fact that like no matter what we go through, we will be able to get through it together. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to be really painful in some moments, but we've got each other. We've got stability.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Even
just like trying to get pregnant, right? Like from there, trying to conceive, which like you always think to yourself, you never think it's going to be you. You never think you're going to go through infertility problems or fertility problems in general. And we've been trying to get pregnant for a year and it still hasn't happened. And even in that, it's like our relationship has grown stronger because of it, because we've been able to communicate with each other on such different levels. We've been able to talk about like love and life and sex and intimacy in such different scopes as well. Which anybody who's dealing with infertility issues out there can understand how sex becomes like quite mechanical after a while, and how many conversations we had to have around that, trying to like bring ourselves back to like a place of intimacy. But yeah, I think we should have like a full-on episode about that, because it's definitely very interesting.
Yeah, I think we should.
I also think that perhaps one of the things that we've reckoned with more so this year than we ever have in our entire relationship is the fact that we are from different countries. Like, I think we realize, of course, like I have a different accent than you. And like, we always talk about the fact that we're from different places and we've both been to our respective hometowns. But as we look towards having a family and having more stability, then those questions of like, where do we want to be long-term, or even like half long-term? Where do we want to raise children? And I think you and I have somewhat differing opinions on it in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that you're going to find the right partner when you go through challenging situations, and whether it's where you want to live or infertility or living in multiple places as you build a company. Not to say that couples should go through that, because if you avoid that your whole life, that's great. But once you do go through that and you realize like, oh, this person is the person through thick and thin, it's reassuring to know like, oh, I made the right decision about my life partner. So I think we've kind of gotten a crash course of that throughout the year, and it's really refreshing to know we're going to figure it out because we actually want to do it together. But yeah, when it comes to living in Australia or America, listen, at the end of the day, we'll probably have our opinions, but we're going to make it work. You know, like I know you want to live, I don't know if we could do 50-50, but even if we have to do 50-50, we'll do whatever, as long as we have the money to do it. But I think with us, there's no set in stone rule where, you know, maybe you say, I want to live in Australia for a full year or two. Okay, maybe that is the option, but maybe we live in America for a full year or two like we've been doing. I think knowing that there's no deal breakers and that we're just going to make it work is very refreshing.
Fuck it, both of us gonna be like, let's move to Sweden for a year. We'd be like, why not? You know what I mean? Like, it just would. But to your point, like, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about our relationship is like, we are both very adaptable, and there is nothing set in stone. It's kind of like the joy of being a bit of a vagabond and not having like a home base.
Yeah.
So funny that sometimes that like things that you perceive to be negatives, like the uncertainty of not having a space to live, or et cetera, is actually a real benefit.
Yeah, I think we do a great job of it. And once we do get a main stable home or area, I think it's just going to be that much better, because we're going to be in a position where we know what it's like to not be in that position and cherish it more.
100%. Where do you think that we'll buy our first home?
Our first home?
Australia. Sorry.
I mean, price dependent. I think the way things are playing out, I would see us buying some type of property, whether it's an apartment or a condo in New York City, just because we'd probably use that first. But there could be cheaper options in areas like Australia. Like I know the main cities are pretty similar to the main cities in America.
Don't you want on the Gold Coast?
Yeah. So if there was something, you just don't know.
It's true. You just don't know. But I can already envision in my head having, like, I mean, let's put it out there. Let's manifest it. A brownstone in the West Village, done. Easy. I know that we don't technically have $17 million right now, but one day we might, and we will. That combined with like a beach house on the Gold Coast in Australia.
I mean, those are the first two ideal ones.
What fucking better life could you ask for?
Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, speaking of things like that, what do you think, we talked about the biggest challenges, but what do you think the things this past year that you're the most grateful for? And it doesn't have to be just us, it could be just like scope of the entire year.
I'm really just grateful that you, my family, your family, we have a lot of support, whether that's emotional, whether that's just cheerleaders on the sideline. Just seeing just how much support we have in life, it really makes me very happy. And yeah, I always knew I had support from my family. Obviously, I knew I had support from you, and that's kind of grown over the last year. Meeting your family this year and seeing how they treat me like a son and how my family treats you like a daughter, I think the bigger your support pool gets, not the easier life gets, but the more you enjoy things and the more you see the purpose of life. Because, you know, whether you're making an app or you're traveling or have a job, what's the purpose if you don't have a good support system or people that actually care about you and what you're doing? And that's I think, yeah, just growing my support system this year has been really, really cool.
It was I ditto that, but it was such a beautiful thing for you to meet my family, because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Joe had never met my family before we got married. Like, obviously he met him through like FaceTime and Skype and all that kind of stuff, but like never physically hugged my mother before we got married. And so it was such a unique situation, but also my mum was like, that fucking tracks with you. And also tracks with when you told your mother, and when they texted in the group chat that morning, they're like, oh, Hannah and Joe are getting married. And they're like, yep, that's super Joe. So it just shows that we're both incredibly spontaneous people and not run-of-the-mill, not very typical human beings. But when you got to go back there and like the way that you connected with Elliot, who's my oldest nephew, and even the connection that like you had with my sister, who's like not the warmest to people straight up, and like I knew my mum was gonna love you, but like the connection that you and her and Kevin have, and like even with my father, whom, you know, I don't have the greatest relationship with, it's like we still made that effort to go out, and I feel like you really integrated yourself into the family quite seamlessly. Not that I had any doubt that you wouldn't be able to, because you're very much a people person, but
yeah, you make everybody feel like they're seen and heard and that they're wanted. And I feel like,
do you think your family is more welcoming or mine?
Welcoming? That's a good question,
isn't it?
I feel like different people in each family are welcoming.
Yeah, it's true. But overall,
I actually feel like the most welcoming people are both not tied to our direct family. I feel like Laura, who's your sister-in-law,
Loris, love you,
Laura, and Nicole, who's our sister-in-law, were actually the most welcoming, and they're not even really tied to either family. So I don't know, I feel like it's very similar, to be honest.
That's so funny that you say that. I agree.
Yeah, and I would even also say like this past year has really shown me like true friendship. LA has been a tricky spot for me. Obviously I have my core people in New York, but becoming a godparent to now three people, right? Ray's kids, Andrew's kids, that show like they really value me as a person, and like to give that role to their child's awesome. But in LA, you know, it's a interesting place, and I've even found some of my new best friends there that really care about me, and those are the people who want us to do this, because when we talk to them, it's so refreshing to have a deep, intelligent conversation in LA, because everything on camera is sugar-coated, right? And like our podcast, although it's real and organic, it's sugar-coated.
But it's also centered around certain themes, you know what I mean? Like we're a dating app and we're talking about dating and relationships and human connection, and like when we peel away the layers, like you were talking about in the last podcast that we just had, about like the different versions of yourself, right? And we have to, in a lot of ways, like you have to put on the fucking CEO hat, you have to put like the podcaster Joe hat on, I got to put the podcaster Hannah hat on, and that's just nature, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's not that it's falsifying who you are, it's just a different version of you. But I think the aim with these monthly one-on-ones is so that people can understand like who we actually are as human beings, good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, and I think each friend does something different for you. We just came back to New York and invited our New York friends to our pop-up, and you could tell people are genuinely happy for you. And Vin in particular, who's someone who I've lived with in New York, who I adore, you could tell that he was just really happy about what we were doing, and there was no jealousy or kind of like, oh, well, look at what I'm doing. He was just genuinely happy for us in the moment. I really cherish that. And then, you know, there's two people in LA that I really, really adore for different reasons. And Ian is just one of them, where every time that we hang out, we're going to be our true selves, whether we're sad, we're mad, we're happy, we're going to get the real version of us. And we even talk about how refreshing it is to know, like, when you hang out with somebody, it takes a lot of energy, and you have to maybe like put an act on to make it look like everything's cool. But when you have friends that you can actually hang out with and just be your true self, it makes you excited to see that friend, because they may be able to help with the problem, or they maybe just listen, and you could actually vent to them as opposed to gossiping.
They replenish you.
Yeah, and I think venting your emotions and letting them out versus gossiping are two different things. And I enjoy, you know, because I need to do that, right? You need to let things out and just not even complain, but just like speak things that get out of your system.
Heck yeah, but that's a natural human emotion. I mean, that's why I like love Jussie so much. That's why I literally call her, you know, one of my soulmates, is because I met her 8 years ago, and ever since that moment we have just been able to be ourselves with each other. And like, that's not always pretty, it's not always gorgeous, but every time I'm with her I feel more fulfilled and filled up than I ever do taken away from. And I think that you can really identify, particularly living in Los Angeles, those people who pull and take from you, and those people who give.
Yeah, 100%.
It's really beautiful. I'd say like one of the things I'm really grateful for, even though it kind of sounds a little bit inane, is that we made it to our 1 year anniversary. Because I always say that the first year of marriage is really hard, and like, boy, did we have a lot of things to contend with. Still kind of contending with. Like, we had the miscarriage, we had still going through the visa process. I wasn't allowed to work. Like, there was so many factors that came into that first year of marriage. We're building a fucking app, we're moving around, like we're doing all of these wild, crazy things. And yet I'm so confident in the fact that we came out the other end of that first year of marriage so much stronger, so much more in love. Like, the way that we talk to each other, the way that we communicate now, eons apart of like what it was when we first got married. It's wild. Good for us.
Good for us.
So proud of us. What are some things that we're both actively working on to grow together? What do you think?
Individually or like together?
I think maybe individually to be together, or it could just be like working on things so that we are a better couple.
I think individually it is me reiterating to you that although my job and our job is a lot of time and energy and focus, it's not more important than something else in my life, which is a life with you. And I think I still have to work on my words and my actions on showing that, but it is truthful in the sense of, yes, I put everything I can into that, but it's not as important as growing a life with you. And I do that to help in the future of our life. But when you're in a startup, it may look more important and it may seem more important than someone else's regular job, but a job's a job. People go to work and they work really hard and they come home to their families, and you know, they're out of mind, out of sight for 10 hours of a day. Because I'm not out of sight, out of mind, and I'm kind of all over the place doing it with you or home. It might seem that I'm not paying attention to you or that you're secondary, but it's not the case at all. So I think just working on that and kind of showing.
I think that feeds into what I was going to say. And like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but also I disagree with what you're saying, because like, you don't work 10 hours a day. Neither of us do. We work minimum 12, 13 hours a day each, every single fucking day. And so there is like a lot of discrepancies and a lot of differences between a normal 9 to 5 and what we do and what you do in particular. But then I'd say like the thing that I want to work on moving forward as a couple is just balance. Like, I understand that we're never going to have the type of balance that like other people can achieve. Again, our life is so different and so nuanced, and I love that it is. I hate it sometimes, but I also love it. But just trying to find like we very rarely have date nights anymore because we're so fucking busy. We're not very like physically intimate with each other throughout the day, whether that be like a kiss or a thing, because either we're around each other, and so it's kind of like we're in the same room and we've seen each other, so there's no like kiss good morning or kiss goodbye.
I give you kiss good morning every morning.
That's not true.
That's not true?
That's not true. You don't give me a kiss good morning every morning.
When I leave the house.
And when you leave that's what I'm saying. When you leave the house.
Yeah.
But you look at like the context of like this last month when we've been living with your parents, or we've been like coming to the city every
That's
day.
true.
You know what I mean? Like little things like that where we can be more cognizant of that. I think would be really nice. And then just like, I know we've tried this so many times and we've talked about it on the podcast before, but like we've got to have a cutoff, bro. Like we've got to figure out a moment throughout the day, whether that's 8 p.m. I'm okay to push it to 10 p.m.
Who's the CEO that you said goes on a date with his wife every Tuesday?
I can't remember. It wasn't Netflix. It was somebody. Maybe it was Netflix. No, it was somebody though. But he said it so beautifully, and he was like, "This is an absolute non-negotiable. Every Tuesday, I am out of work at 5 p.m. I go pick my wife up by 6 p.m. and that is our night.
And nobody's allowed to contact
Nobody is
him.
allowed to. The company could be burning down, and nobody is allowed to contact him. And I think that, whilst may not be possible right now, I would really like to implement that in some way, shape, or form, because like, I look at my own like work-life balance. I have not had one day off in a month, and that's not okay. Like it truly is. I know that we're like founders and we're starting a company, but like I'm a human too. And like you have sometimes random days where you just like sit down and watch sports, which is great. It's great for you to like release, but the times that you actually have off, so far and few between.
So I think that strategy is better, of one night a week where you're just fully locked in with each other, as opposed to a cutoff every day, because there's too many things that pop up every day to have a timely cutoff. Obviously, like, the later at night it gets, that's fine. But I think having a normal functioning time of 5 p.m. on a day.
But the only problem with that is the fact that like we might have a fucking event or like something. Like we've never celebrated a Valentine's Day, like since being.
That's not true.
No, we haven't. We have not celebrated Valentine's Day, because every Valentine's Day is our fucking Mecca. On Valentine's Day, we've never celebrated Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like little moments like that where like that kind of makes me a bit sad. I understand it and I get it, but like the sentimental.
There's two ways to look at it. There's being sad because you're not following the trend of society, or then there's being happy knowing that you don't need the trend of society to know that every day is Valentine's Day for us. And if you do it a day before, a day after, a week before, a week after,
just one year I want to. Okay, I completely understand what you're saying.
There's two ways of looking at it.
That was very beautifully said, and I agree. But also, just like 1 year, I want to do Valentine's Day.
That's fine.
Also, we've never had a honeymoon.
And what do I say?
Fucking busy.
Like, if you want, and I know we're fully on this now, but when I first met you, I said, if you want to meet a guy that's going to sleep in every day and have sex with you and do your sleepy little days and travel and have vacations, you could have married a surfer. And that wasn't me. I'm
not asking for a vacation, bro. I'm asking for a honeymoon. We didn't even have a wedding.
We're trying to build something, and a lot of people don't know what that's like, and it's a lot of work, and it is what it is.
Will we, on the record, go on a honeymoon?
Yes.
When? Within the next 3 years?
Definitely.
Okay. Holding you to that. I've got a recording of it. Well, kind of in the same vein, we're going to dive into the differences between men and women, because I think we've like briefly touched on this in a couple of one-on-ones and then a whole bunch of podcasts. But I think it's something that we personally deal with on like almost a day-to-day basis, because we have a lot of similarities, but we're also so fucking different. And I think a lot of that comes down to the way that we operate, the way that we think, the way that we regulate our emotions. And so I kind of want to talk about, first and foremost, which I found so interesting, was like the emotional responses of men and women. And I found this statistic, this research said that women are more likely to experience and report higher levels of anxiety and depression than men, which I think that we obviously in our relationship can relate to. And not only like internal anxiety and depression, but also societal anxiety and depression. So how do you think that, well, first and foremost, I've had my fair share of struggles with mental health. But would you not agree that over the last couple of years, even in particular when we've been married, that I've like just gone leaps and bounds in terms of being able to regulate my emotions?
100%. I think you individually have done great work, and then collectively, the communication to support that has really, really evolved over time. You showed me something the other day that I think really stood out, that what a woman goes through during her period and the cycle of a month. And I think if you showed that to 100 men, maybe one of them would be like, oh, I knew that. And I think that is something that, whether you're in a relationship or you're trying to understand people of the opposite sex, understanding how people operate is so important to life.
On like a hormonal level? On like
just in general, but on a hormonal level, I think it's really important, but just in life, right? Like watching that video and seeing how it's not a cliche or it's not taboo where women have different emotions in the month, and
like
how
we're not just crazy.
Yeah, and how men should be emotionally intelligent enough to understand how to operate within those different days, as opposed to it, like exactly like you said, cliche and say, oh, you're crazy, you're on your period. Because understanding the biology and intelligence and the science of the opposite sex, I think nowhere as a kid did I ever learn that. And I feel like that would go a really, really, really long way.
I agree. I couldn't, and I think it's something that perhaps as we walk down the path of, you know, still continuously trying to get pregnant, and then when we one day do have a family, such a pertinent thing for us to be able to teach our children as they get into like their teenage years of like, men and women think differently, and don't go into life thinking that they don't. If you think that everybody thinks the same, then you kind of, it's just a recipe for disaster, and then we can use ourselves as examples for them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we talked about something else here, and it might be one of your notes, but again, it could be a cliche that men are practical and logical, and it sounds different than what you're trying to say, right? If somebody says like, oh, men are practical and logical, oh, you're saying men are smarter than women. No, when we dig into the science of it, and again, I'm not a scientist, this is kind of just things that we've read and seen, where this scientist in particular was saying men have compartmentalized every part of their life. There's sports, there's work, there's dating, there's politics, there's health.
Wild.
And we actually, when we're in one thing, and I'm glad you showed me that video, because I even myself thought it was cliche, but I was like, I kind of do operate that way, but is it a cliche? But when you break down the brain of a man, and he actually compartmentalizes all of his thoughts, so when you argue, he's just arguing about that specific thing, and he's bringing up the facts or his opinion on that specific thing. Whereas how you explain women's brains are like wires, and everything's attached, and there's a lot of emotion and energy tied to a women's brain, for good or bad for men, right? That's just how we operate. But understanding this is how each other operate, this is how we have to get something resolved, understanding each other's brains.
I think that also goes down to communication as well. Like the research from the University of California shows that women use more words on average each day than men. And then they are also more likely to focus on building emotional connections in conversations versus men. Men tend to use communication to solve problems, and they're less likely to express emotions through words. Do you think that rings true?
Yeah, I think a perfect example, and you know, sometimes we joke about it, but when I come home, you say, how was work? And not because I'm trying to hide anything, I say, it was good. And you say, well, what do you mean just good? And I'm like, I don't know as a person what else to say. And you could say like, who's there? What did you do? And I'm like, I don't know, I worked and it was good. And then as you do, because everything is tied together, you could ask me about a story arc. And I say, oh, yes, I was talking to Riston and Caitlin about this. Oh, so you're working with Caitlin and Riston today? Yes. Why didn't you mention that? I don't know. I didn't know that I had to. And that is a simple example of like, we just think about, okay, what's the answer to the question? Not let me literally, and I joke about you. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write down literally every step I did today. Is that what you want? And you're
No,
like,
it's like,
no,
but it's like the emotional connection to it. I think that study kind of says it perfectly. It's when I ask you how your day was, and like say for instance, if you ask me how my day was, I'd be like, oh, it was incredible. I hung out with X, Y, and Z, and I did this and did that, because there's this emotional connection to the way that I communicate. Whereas you see it, the problem is me going, how's your day? That's the problem. And your solution is, it was good. And to me, it's so baffling. And then also it's like, you know, you get into like the deeper psychology of it, and this is not stereotypical of women in general, but again, our brains work in such different ways where I'm like, if you don't tell me, you're hiding something from me.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes. And then especially if you have kind of like trust issues like I do, then that's immediately where you go, okay, well, like you're purposefully hiding something from me by being vague. And that's frustrating. I've learned very quickly and very deeply that that's not the case with you. But it's also still, there is like that thing in the back of my mind, because again, that's not how I would answer.
And it also seems fake, because again, men don't operate that way, where it's like, okay, I know that Hannah wants more information, so I'm going to try and give her more information. And then when you try and do that, it's not authentic. So like something seems off. I'm like, yeah, it is off, because I'm trying to help you and trying to create a picture of how everything's okay. But me doing that, it's not normal to my brain, and it makes things 10 times worse.
It really does. Well, speaking of that, I think that like one thing that we always deal with, and I'm sure that every other couple on this earth can probably deal with, is that our communication styles in terms of like arguing or trying to resolve a problem. Like sometimes, and I think you've gotten a lot better at this, but we still have some issues with it. When I come to you with an issue, if say I'm like, I have this problem, a lot of the times, in fact, 98% of the time, I'm not coming to you because I need you to help me fix it, even though that's your first inclination. I think it's a lot of men's first inclination is to be like, you have a problem, I shall fix. Whereas I come to you because I want an ear, I want a shoulder, I want emotional support in that moment of making the decision of how to fix it. Like I'm very capable of being able to fix it. And I think a lot of the times I get really frustrated at you because I'll say something and you're like, okay, we'll just do that. I'm like, no, stop for a second. Have empathy for me, understand where I'm coming from and be like, fuck, babe, that must be really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I also agree. Oh, I also think that there's two sides to that story in the sense of, no, I laughed. There's two sides to that story where you could easily say, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you something and I want to talk to you about something. I don't need a solution. I just want to get this out. And then if I don't just listen, then maybe you could be frustrated. But if you bring a problem to me and it seems like you're not happy, yeah, I'm going to try and fix it because I want you to be happy. So maybe it works both ways.
I mean, that's fair. That's completely fair. I don't like it, but it's fair. Sometimes I just want you to be a mind reader. I think all people and partners do. It's just the reality. We'll talk about the stress response, which is kind of like similar to what we were talking about before, but the American Psychological Association shows that under stress, men tend to have a fight or flight response, whereas women are more likely to have a tend and befriend response, which I thought was so interesting.
Really?
So in the context of like our arguments, right? Like when we've had arguments, you're like, peace the fuck out, I'm out, I'm going. And I'm like, heck no, you're staying here and we're talking this out, tend and befriend, which I think is very, very much us, right? Why do you think that men feel the need to like have a little bit of a run, whereas women want to solve the issue right then and there?
I mean, this is just my blunt assessment of this is men are very aggressive, right? When there's conflict or tensions arising, we're aggressive. That's just in our nature. So that's why sometimes men fight and sometimes things escalate. And I think obviously there's not two ways and it's not black and white. But maybe some men do get aggressive physically and emotionally. And I don't think that I would ever want to be in that relationship with a female or a partner because that's terrible. And I think the only other way that we can quickly revert to not being physically and emotionally aggressive is to cool off and remove ourselves from the situation. And I think that's kind of what I do. I was brought up where my dad would never touch my mother. They would obviously have arguments, and I was taught like, you under no circumstances do you
put your hands on a woman.
Yeah, like, you know, we argue all the time, but I would never.
We argue all the time.
I'm just saying. We're a couple.
We have a great relationship.
I never will physically touch you. Sometimes there's been aggressive verbal conversations, but those are, I hate those as well. And you never want that. I think
that's both of us as well. It's not just you like being verbally aggressive, it's me as well. I think we like feed off each other because we're both very stubborn, we're both pretty passionate and like, dare I say, sometimes aggressive people. Well, it's interesting you say that because they kind of, the association kind of like laid it out being more like, it's in those situations more for like men to want to remove the problem. So I suppose in a way it is kind of like what you're saying. They don't really go into like what the depth of that problem is, but like they remove the stress, they remove the problem, that they fly, they go away. Whereas women, the connection through shared feelings can help manage that stress. So the more they talk about it and like, I think, and again, something that you can recognize, like the more we talk about an issue, the more we realize that we're going to the same place, we're just coming from different angles. Yeah.
And I think, again, not saying this is fact, but when tensions rise, I think that men look for physical ways to release their stress. So maybe that's why a lot of guys work out or
jerk off.
Okay. But you know,
It's true.
sometimes punch a wall, right?
Yeah.
We get aggressive because it's in our nature. And I think that's why sometimes women get emotional and cry. And I'm just saying from experience I've had with women. And I think it's just natural. It's not saying, you know, women always cry or men are always aggressive, but I think those are just the natural emotions that we see play out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, darling. All right, let's wrap this up. Well, this section up. Do you think that men and women can ever fully understand each other's experiences, or are we just too different?
Oh, I feel like with the political temperature in the world right now, I don't know how to answer that.
Answer it truthfully.
Can men and women ever fully understand
Each other's experiences, or are we just too different?
I don't. I think that. Oh, it's a tough question to
Do you want me
answer.
to answer it first, and then you can think about it?
I think it's just maybe over time. I don't know about right now. I think we're not evolved enough as a species to. We can't even figure out ourselves, let alone another whole gender, whatever gender you are. So I don't know.
I think that what you said at the start of this conversation is really true, like about the period thing. You'd have no idea, right? But you informed yourself and now you know a little bit more. Will that information stick for the rest of your life? Probably not. You probably have to be reminded a multitude of more. I think it is our responsibility if you are in, say, for instance, a same-sex relationship, or you're interested in the same sex, or opposite sex, that you do the research to understand your partner. And I think that comes from not only like boots on the ground research of like actually living it and experiencing it and logging those things of like, oh, he doesn't like this and this doesn't like this, and is there a reason? Is this common with all men, or is this just with him? Like those kind of little things, but then also like biologically and DNA wise and like societally and like all of these different factors that come in. Are we ever going to fully understand each other? I don't think so.
You said fully. That's why I said
but
no.
I think, do we have the possibility of reaching true understanding of each other? Yeah. I
think as evolution keeps happening, yeah. I mean, if you look at,
but I think that even now, like even if again each person is differently evolved, right? Like we meet some people and you're like, you're so fucking stupid. No offense, but you're so fucking stupid. You're so unevolved in life. And we really pride ourselves on continuously learning, continuously growing, and hopefully just being the absolute best version of ourselves, even though there never is, because there's always something else to learn, right?
Yeah, I mean,
about you and I, like think about where we've come in terms of understanding each other. But we actively put in the work to understand each other now. And I think if people did that on a regular basis, then our world would be a much kinder place.
100%. I think we have a long way to go. Long way to go.
Preaching to the choir. All right, before we get into some burning questions from our community, I want to talk about very briefly about like what's next for us.
Ooh, so we're going to Arizona and then LA and then
I didn't mean physically, but yeah.
You mean like with the company or just us?
Just life, a company, life, us as humans.
Yeah, I think we're moving back to New York to make that our new home base, and I think that's going to be really, really nice because we talk about splitting time between America and Australia, and I think what we mean is splitting time between my family and your family. Mm-hmm. And in LA, we don't really have family. We have a really small community. Which
in some way has kind of been nice, but I think as we get older, we realize like how much what you were saying earlier, like we value that community so heavily. It'd be nice to have a support system close.
Yeah, so I think making New York our home base for the next year is going to be really great. And then hopefully after that, figuring out if we can do the Australia-New York split would be really cool. And I think, you and I in year 2 of marriage has been really, really nice, and couldn't be happier with that. And we're building a business. So we have the app. We have a whole new brand that we're starting, which we can't release yet, but we're opening up a physical store in New York, which is pretty cool. So our lives are professionally getting so busy and, personally so strong. Mm-hmm. And I think having our New York family, which is really big around us, is going to be great. What about you?
I think ditto everything you said. I think that I'm really kind of just excited for all the things that are going to happen this next year that we don't even know about. You know what I mean? Like we said it earlier, our life is in this constant influx and we're never set in stone with anything. Like this time next year, we could be in Australia, we could be in New York, we could be on fucking Mars. I don't know. But each step of the way, it's such a beautiful learning and growth experience for us. And all the things that are happening with the app, it's like, I know that you as a CEO, nothing ever happens quickly enough, right? And you want the company to grow so rapidly. But I look at where we were a year ago and to where we're going to be a year from now. And I'm just like, I'm so insanely proud of you and so insanely proud of us for the ability to keep good heads on our shoulders and steadily continue to grow this company. And I just can't even imagine what this next year or the next couple of years are going to look like.
Teamwork.
Fuck yeah, babe. All right, to round this out, I don't have cue cards. I'm so sorry, Joey. We've gone to our community, not only to like our socials, but like to the people in our life, and we've asked them some burning questions or burning scenarios that maybe we could help advise on. Are you ready? I've always been close to a friend and their ex. They broke up a year ago, and while I never looked at them that way before, something shifted during a group hangout. Suddenly there's chemistry and I'm not sure how to handle it. Do I pursue it? Do I talk to my friend first? Or do I shut it down before it comes something more? What do I do?
Well, our last guest who we shot earlier today had a similar situation. Wild. I mean, there's
like, wait, okay, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Does an ex's friend, like, does a friend's ex ever are they ever game? Are they ever fair play?
Yeah, you can fall in love with anybody.
Yeah, but like on a friendship level.
Well, I'm getting into my response.
Okay, sorry.
What I would personally do is I would talk to my friend first and kind of say, like, listen, you guys broke up. Is there anything there? And I would start there. And no matter what they say, I would say, I have grown fond of this person and I think the feeling's mutual. And I would get their feedback. And you could tell a lot about your friendship with them, but also you can get their full support and everything can be a lot easier. And this is just what I would do, because if you do a workaround, maybe the workaround is what ruins your friendship and not just the communication. Yeah. So I would say I would start with the friend and just kind of lay it all out there. And if the friend is really that upset and your friendship is that strong and you don't see a real future with that person, maybe you do just avoid it.
I think that's good advice. I've been with my partner for a few years and we've built a strong relationship, but I've just found out that they've been hiding a major part of their past, like something they've never told me about, and it's a pretty big deal. Now I'm questioning everything. Do I confront them? How do I decide whether it's something I can get past or if it's a deal breaker?
Well, you definitely confront them.
Fuck yeah, you confront them.
The longer you hold that in.
I think it also, like, I wish I had a little bit more information about what it was. Like, obviously this person didn't want to share too deeply, which I get. But like, what is it? Is it like they have a child or they have like an arrest record? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is it, and to the depth of what it is? But also at the same time, if you've been with someone for a while, like if you turn around to me like, oh, by the way, I've got a 3-year-old child or no, a 6-year-old child, I'd be like, and you never told me. Even if it wasn't a child, even if it wasn't that level of magnitude, you purposely kept something from me and you lied to me. I don't know how I'd handle that. Yeah,
well, I think the fact that this person knows it's going to eat at them every single day, and they're going to look deeper into every single thing that happens moving forward, and it's going to drive them crazy. And I think that will break their relationship anyway.
Agreed. So I think the best thing that you could probably do right now is have that conversation. And it's going to be so hard, but like tell them that you know.
But go into the conversation knowing that there's a path forward.
Is there?
Yeah, there's always a path forward.
It's very optimistic of you.
But
I think it depends on your own personal boundaries.
What's the big thing? We don't know the big thing.
That's
so
what I'm saying,
they could sit down with this person and they could say, hey, just so you know, I've had 2 jobs this whole time, right?
But I think, again, it's situational.
Yeah,
but
you don't know.
But they said it's a really big deal.
Okay, so here's a unique situation. Say they're like, okay, you're a stripper on the side because you're trying to make extra money. But seriously, right? It's like, you don't know.
Are you a stripper?
And maybe they have a good reasoning and they're like, you know what? I shouldn't do that. Here's why I did it. Here's my explanation. And you could say, okay, that makes sense. I don't like it. For us to move forward, it has to change. But maybe there's a good reason, right? Like if you told me, say I saw you were on OnlyFans and I was like, holy shit, like this is a huge deal. Like I'm married to you. You're on OnlyFans. Would I go into it saying, hey, we're 100% done. Like we're divorced. Or I would say like, hey, I'm calling you out on this. This is a huge, huge red flag. Explain it to me.
Yeah.
And maybe you say like, hey, listen, I'm in $50,000 worth of debt and I had to get out of it. I didn't want to tell you. And you show me everything.
All right, you know, you make a fair point. You
don't
a fair
know.
point. I've recently started dating someone who's really great, but I can't help but compare them to my ex. We've been on several dates and I can see the potential, but I can't shake the feeling that my ex was better in certain ways. How do I stop comparing them and give this new relationship a fair chance?
I think there's two things. You need closure from your ex.
Which isn't always possible.
And I think when you meet the right person, you won't really think about your ex and you won't compare. I think you always compare until you meet somebody that's uncomparable. And I don't think that's a cliche. I actually mean that, where you're going to feel these feelings that you've never felt before. And that's when you know it's the right person. So if you're comparing somebody to somebody else, probably not the right person. And you probably have some unresolved issues with your ex.
Baby, you're so wise. Two more. I've been friends with someone for years and recently we've started getting closer, like emotionally and physically. We've had a couple of almost moments, but I'm scared to take the next step. I don't want to ruin our relationship, but I also feel like there's something more between us. Do I take the risk and potentially lose a friendship, or do I keep things platonic?
I think that you've already gone down a road of no return, because there's that, once you have sexual tension with somebody, it does not go away. So I feel like you have to see where it goes. And if it's a long-term thing, that's great. You could maybe see where it goes and it doesn't work out and you can become friends again. But I think leaving it as it is to save a friendship is probably not going to work, because I don't see sexual tension kind of dissipating.
I think you're going to end up ruining the relationship if you don't acknowledge it. But I say that to like go about, I actually wrote a blog about this really recently of like how to define the relationship, right? And in situations like that, when you go after people who are really good friends, just have to put this out there, the best relationships start as friendships and like have the core base of a friendship. We've talked about this so many times. But also at the same time, if you go about this in the right way, it should be okay. Like you've got to go about it in a way that like no matter what their answer is, you're okay with. Because if you go into it going, well, if they don't say yes then we can't be friends, then you've automatically eliminated the friendship. If you go into it going, hey, listen, I'm going to express my feelings and hopefully they feel the same way. If they don't, then we can still kind of go back to it. But it's also about up to the other person as well, how they feel about you approaching that situation. Does it ruin the platonic friendship?
But it seems self-serving, because
I don't think it's self-serving at all.
Yeah, well, when you're friends with somebody, you're friends with them.
Yeah, but AKA.
But I think that if you don't want to tell them because you don't want to lose a friendship, that means you don't want to lose them out of your life because you still like them.
I think it's more that they're scared to make the first move. And I think that, like, they say that there's tension. Like, they've had a couple of almost moments. Yeah,
tension means that they're both feeling it,
yeah,
which I agree.
That's what I'm saying. They're both feeling it.
Yeah, so that's not going to go away.
But one person has to, I don't think it's self-serving at all. One person.
I thought you meant one person feels it.
No. I'm talking about this context. Like,
okay.
You both are feeling it. And, like, clearly, like, one of you, like, you're both afraid to take the leap. Have an open, honest conversation about it.
Yeah,
like,
because you're not going to be real friends, because you're both going to date other people if you don't talk about it.
Yeah, and then you'd be pissed about that person dating another person.
You're going to not be a good friend.
Yeah, agreed. I think, again, came from different sides, but we were saying the same thing. Last one, darling. I found out that this person I'm dating still keeps in touch with their ex. And not just casual texts, but they've had a few heart-to-heart conversations recently. I don't feel comfortable with it, but I don't want to seem controlling or insecure. How do I approach this without making a big deal or seeming possessive?
I would say talk to that person, say, hey, do me a favor for our relationship. When you do talk to your ex, I would like to know every little detail, and I'll be there to help support your friendship and support whichever one of you is going. Hopefully the other person's going through something and it's not you, because you should rely on your partner for that. But maybe you dated somebody who dealt with a lot in life and you were the main person in their life, and you care about them as a person, and that's great. But I would be very, very transparent with your current partner and say, hey, listen, I cannot let this person go out of my life because they actually need me. I'm going to tell you exactly how we communicate. I'm going to let you know exactly how it goes. And if you think anything's inappropriate, we can talk about that. But I'm going to show you how, the context of what's going on.
You're so wise, darling.
Am I?
You really are. Your emotional intelligence is like through the fucking roof. It's so beautiful to see.
Yeah, maybe I just got lucky today.
Well, I really like this little one-on-one, and I can't wait to do more in the future. In the new year, really.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Until then, I'll see you in January.
All right. Please, we'll do our normal outro, I guess.
Okay.
Please subscribe to our last podcast. We hope you liked.
Subscribe to our last podcast, or you mean watch it?
Subscribe to our podcast and listen to our last episode. And if you really liked hearing the true deep side of Hannah, that'd be great to get some feedback, because we really do enjoy this and we will keep it going.
Let us know in the comments.
Yeah. happy dating, and we'll see you next time.